All right. Well, thank you all for coming out tonight and joining us. We have a great guest, Mr. Manglik. He brings with him a substantial amount of experience in both consulting and industry from firms such as Booz Allen, Accenture, IBM, Symantec, United Technologies. Most recently, he returned to Accenture as managing director in India, and he led substantial period of growth, growing that business all the way up to 70,000 employees, while also experiencing substantial revenue and profit growth over that time. He's also been involved with academia throughout his career, especially with schools such as CMU, MIT, IIT, and IIM. And he's continuing that as he will be coming here as a guest lecturer in Mini 2 to teach a class on leadership. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming one of our own, Mr. Harshman.
Thank you very much. Let me first tell you what a pleasure it is to be here, back. I left here, I just did a quick calculation, and if I did that correctly, no guarantees, 37 years ago. Seems like 100. But, it's really exciting to be back here, and I appreciate the invitation both to address the students here, but we are going to try something which my friends term brave, but I know it's euphemism for crazy, is Bob Damon, John Mather, and Laurie Weingart. They've talked me into attempting a course on leadership. So this is a preamble. If I survive this, I get to come back. And I know they're all sitting there taking notes. So how's that for performance pressure, right? Okay. So my journey, actually, here I'm supposed to talk about my journey. And frankly, it's interesting for certain. I'm not sure if it's that impressive, and I have it on the authority of my two daughters that it is not impressive, not impressive, but we'll see. Rather than simply take you through from this date to this date, I did this, from that date, I did that, I will give you a little of that context, but I was wondering if I were sitting in your place, what would make it interesting? Would you really want to listen to a travelogue? And I said, no. So what is it that I think I can attempt to convey that may be of interest and perhaps of some value? And I thought that maybe I ought to, as I go across, focus on the lessons I've learned. And you may agree with them, you may not agree with them, that's okay. But certainly I'll offer it. If you find them interesting, think about it. If it helps you, wonderful. But certainly that's where my focus will be. And the one thing in life that's very important is you learn more from not when you're on the finishing stand receiving a gold medal in the first place, because what has brought you there are the strengths you have. It's more interesting to learn from situations or experiences where you have realized that you need to do some course correction. Those lessons are much more powerful. So I think I'm going to focus more not on moments of glory, but actually moments of hard thinking. And my intention is to be very open and very candid. I have never had any issues with just being truthful and saying it like it is. So let me start there. So first, an overview, and then I'll go into specific selected periods and say what was the situation and what did I learn from it. Okay. So born in India, grew up in India, went to college in India, actually worked for a couple of years in India. And I joined a company which was on the list of maybe 4 or 5 companies everyone would kill for to get there, but it doesn't exist today. Joined as a management trainee, and people said, man, your life is made. Now you just forget about everything and make cans. It was in the packaging business, made cans and packaging, metal box. It was a British company. But a couple of years into it, I said, I don't think it's my thing to be a can maker, so to speak. And went to grad school. At that time, I was still pretty pumped up about engineering, so I got a master's in engineering at Case Western nearby. And I said, yeah, I'm a good engineer, but I want to do something different. What do? I have to prepare myself. So I said, okay, let's get an MBA. So I came here. And that was a turning point. Booz Allen, campus interview. I have to tell you, it was the only offer I received, so I was very grateful for it after being deeply in hock. Booz Allen, from there I joined a client, Pratt & Whitney. They make aircraft engines. Friend Jesse Mott and I share a heritage. He comes from a Pratt & Whitney family. I worked there, so real delight. And I've just discovered that actually John Mather seems to also have this aerospace aviation bug, so we are going to have some good times. Half the people in that business do it just for the joy of it, and these large noisy engines and fast flying planes that go, making a living is good, but it's good if that comes. From there I went to Anderson Consulting, which is the predecessor of Accenture, for a couple of years. Launched out on my own for a couple of years, and that was a character building experience. Learned a lot, wow, from that one. And around that time, IBM had what is described as a near-death experience. So Gerstner came in, he brought in Jerry York, the two of them literally saved the company. And Gerstner said, we have got to change something. So they started to take in mid-career people. So then I went to IBM, what's now GBS, but earlier at the start it was called IBM Global Consulting. IBM Consulting Group. And the man they hired to head it was an old Booz guy, Bob Howe. And when I went in for an interview with him, I really wanted to go to IBM. He said, well, do you have any questions? And I said, well, no, not really. So, there was this silence, but fortunately, he also had made up his mind. And he said, do you know such and such guy? And I was still searching. He said, no, I remember your resume. This guy came in and said, if you hire one person, this was this guy, and this happened when I was in Cleveland at Booz Allen. I didn't contradict him, I didn't remember, but I said, if this man's giving me a job, that's good. So I was there. 10 years, out of those 10 years, I was also sent to Singapore in various Asia-Pacific roles. Headed Asia-Pacific consulting for a few years for IBM, and then I came back, made a switch again, and went to Symantec. For a year, I had non-competes, etc., so I helped my sister write a book about my father. And that was actually a labor of love because my father was my hero and a very inspiring person. So following that, went to Symantec, cybersecurity, and then suddenly I was in India. So that's where the story ends. So now you have the long journey plan. Let me start early. And my story, and by the way, my plan is we'll do this for about 30 minutes, and then we'll get into a conversation. But if you have a desperate need to stop me and say something or ask me, that's okay. So my journey literally starts in the jungles of India. When I was young, my father was posted in a very remote site, and we lived in tents. We have pictures, I remember. And it was 100 miles from the nearest rail station, and it used to take 2 days to get there. But that was a wonderful period. We were young. The only other child was my sister. Uh, and the people I dealt with were either my father and other engineers who were close colleagues, or geologists who were known by the local Aboriginal people as Pathar Sungal translates to sniffer of rocks, because they'd see these guys pick up rocks and examine it closely, and people thought they were sniffing them. Or truck drivers, servants, forest guards, trackers. And I remember very distinctly one time my father taking me out in his arms and saying, "Can you hear that?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, that's a tiger." So, it was a kind of a storied upbringing. And what I learned from that was a appreciation for the simple things in life. It was simple. There was no electricity. There was no running water. There was no hospital. There was no phones. And there were no roads. They had just cleared the trees, and, the car or truck would go, and there were no bridges, so this car had to be loaded up on a boat and then pushed to the other side. It was a wonderful time. And lots of wildlife. My dad, when he would go out of the tent, he would have a rifle slung over his shoulders, because the people working with him were afraid of being attacked. So that was a very interesting upbringing, and learned to read and write from my mother, because there were no schools. So then eventually the time came when people said, "Oh, it's too late. These two kids should have been put in school a long time ago." So then we went to a city to live with our grandparents, studied there for a while, then I was in school. So fast forward to school when I'm about 12 or so. And this is a well-known school in Lucknow, and the high point of the school culture was the annual meet with a sister school in Calcutta, and it also had a sister school in Lyon. It was called La Martiniere. And I badly wanted to be on the swimming team, because I decided I think I have what it takes. And I didn't make it through the pre-selection, so it was quite a down moment. And it wasn't fun to see the other people who I thought I would have been with being feted and greeted and so on. And it was really a very down moment. But then something happened. I recall feeling a deep conviction that, no, I am good, and I should have been there. And I continued to practice. And at the end of the season, they had something called the swimming gala. Here they say gala, right? Where it's a free-for-all. Whoever wants can compete. And lo and behold, I swam a stroke which nobody had asked me to, and I got first and broke a record. Another stroke, I came second, and both first and second broke the record, so that changed the dynamics next year entirely. And then I made it to the school team, the state team, selected for nationals, and so on. So what's the point of this story? There are several points. One, for achievement, you have to have the hunger for it. And you have to have the conviction that you want to do it. Talent helps, but talent won't get you to Carnegie Hall. You can have great talent, but you have to apply yourself, and you perform when you go based on that conviction, because if you have that passion, that conviction, then you perform at a different level. And positive experiences are great because they build self-esteem and they make you more positive. So my first learning on this is set goals, and set goals that you believe in, and be prepared to do the hard work for them. And this is a kind of a minor example. It may seem very trivial, but in my life and in my psychology, it was very important. And it goes on from there. Okay, so we fast forward now. So when I finished school, we all had to decide what to do. And a lot of my colleagues were sitting for this. You folks may have heard of the IIT, Indian Institute of Technology, written exam. So I sat for that exam, got in high, but I told my dad, who wants to go to engineering? I want to be a nuclear physicist. I'm going into physics. So I said, fine. So I went to another college. For those of you from India, you may have heard of St. Stephen's College, Delhi University, physics honors. But after a year or so, I also said to my father, I don't think I'm enjoying it. So I said, okay, what do you want to do? I said, let's try engineering. He said, okay, so I took the exam again. Got in again. And I'm probably the only person on the planet who has this masochistic streak to go twice for the IIT exam, but I did got in high, so there I go. And I changed my major, got in, became a can maker. So one thing that I want to alert you to out here is that the story of my journey in my life is not a straight line, predefined strategic trajectory. It's a series of zigs and zags, some by design, some not quite so, but wonderful zigs and zags. And the point I'll make early, and then you'll see other zigs and zags in my life, is that you should have an open mind to course correction. And you should have great tolerance for uncertainty and ambiguity. And you should have the confidence to follow your heart. Because there's a requirement for high performance. Clearly you have to be good and you have to apply yourself. And you have to work hard. But when there is passion behind what you elect to do, or what you re-elect to do as you course correct, that will take you to a higher level of performance. And when you are pursuing something that you have a passion for, the hard work is easy. And you don't even realize that you are working hard. It brings enthusiasm. It just creates a different dynamic in your mind. So I would urge all you folks to think about constantly, what is it that you are inspired about, passionate about, and want to do? And do what you enjoy and seek those things out. And you can find it in your work, you can find it somewhere else, but you're going through life only once. So have your own plan. Don't run somebody else's race, and don't follow somebody else's travel itinerary because you say, that person did this, I've got to do the same. Have the confidence to say, you can do it. So that was the first zig. From there, I've already told you that I decided that I didn't want to be a can maker all my life, although people said, you're in one of the most desired companies and you have this ahead and that ahead. And you're doing so well, why are you being so stupid to leave it and go away? And I thought to myself, well, I'm not running away from it. If people are saying that I'm good, well, 2 years or 4 years from now, I won't become bad. I will still be good. And if they want me now, surely they would want me then because I would have enhanced my capabilities with what I'm planning to do. And there was something else. I said, I've grown up in India. I also think there is value in experiencing a different culture, being exposed to new ideas. Those were powerful motivators. And there was a third, but that didn't work out. So I won't dwell there on that one. Yeah, right. So pursuit, yes, but then, and so brought me here, and then you heard that story. So I got to Booz Allen, and that's where the next part of the journey starts. So I did some zigzags there as well because I got that single offer. It wasn't in an area where I really wanted to be, so I kept campaigning, got elsewhere. But I learned a lot of very good things. Consulting is compressed experience in a way. It certainly sharpens your analytical skills, and it's a good launch point. And for people who pursue that as a career, great. But even for people who do not, it's a kind of a training. But what I learned out there was some good, and other things on reflection actually were not good learnings. So the good part was I was always a hard worker, but there really, I realized that there you work really hard, quite hard. So the habits of hard work and focus and concentration were developed. They have served me very well. And just the training and going in quickly and sifting through and saying what are the real issues, back it up with data, etc., they are good. And the one that I went to particularly, great company, now Booz & Company, but at that time certainly they had a very unique culture. It was a macho culture. So if you were coming out and down the elevator when everybody was going in and you just casually said, oh, I've been here all night, I'll be back in an hour, it said, oh, this guy committed hard work. I think it was very stupid. I'm not recommending it as a formula. But you do develop that capability. And anytime you become good at something and you have demonstrated to yourself what you can do, it builds confidence. It builds self-esteem. And you need all these things. So wherever you are, be good at what you're doing. I'm not going to talk about the basic skills that you need in your toolkit as a potential MBA, because that's a given. Those are requirements for entry. So things that I'm focusing on actually go beyond that to the role of the person, your own motivation, your own values, so etc. So this was the good part. Now, what I realized as I started to think about it is that it's also, in some respects, not a representative culture of the real world. It's very rarefied. It's, in a sense, very artificial. You have very high concentration of people who are bright, very focused, very project-oriented. Much to be said for that. But it becomes a culture, at least the trajectory I set for myself, and maybe I read it wrong. And maybe if I was smarter, I would have recognized the aspects I'm saying were missing, is it becomes something where the intellect predominates. And everything that you get judged on or your contributions are through your intellectual impact, which is good. I mean, we need those also. But the reason I'm bringing it up is there is this whole other side of experience that you don't get. And I didn't realize it at that time. Is dealing with people. Not just your colleagues. I mean, you always learn to get along with your colleagues. They are bright people, fun people, sometimes not so fun people, but that's life. But it does not give you it did not give me an introduction into the real world of people. So leadership is about the real world of people. It's all, in one way or another, related to people. Of course, you've got to be competent at what you do. Otherwise, you don't get to be in that spot. Of course, you have to be goal-focused. Of course, you have to deliver. Of course, you have to have a strategic vision. But those are not differentiators. Those are required, those are necessary conditions, but not sufficient conditions. So we are talking about what takes you beyond the necessary conditions. So when Pratt & Whitney, where I had been working along with many other colleagues, they tapped me on the shoulder and said, well, how would you like to come over and join our executive team and continue the work? I was delighted because I had always had this fascination for aerospace. And I've got to take a step back and give you a side story. My ambition was to be a pilot. Actually, there was something else. In those 10 days, my parents always reminded me that my expressed ambition was to be a truck driver's assistant. Because those were the people I was dealing with, and I noticed the driver only drives, but the technical term for that person in India is cleaner. This is the guy who fiddled with the machinery, and that's what I found fascinating. But later a pilot, and then I got eyeglasses, so then I enrolled at IIT in aeronautical engineering and then changed, and that fell by the wayside, but the fascination for aerospace was not lost, or aviation was not lost. So then I made various side entries, joined Pratt & Whitney, married my wife, who was a stewardess with Air India for 8 years, and daughter of a fighter pilot. So, it's kind of still trying to edge into the dream. And even now, even if I'm in a board meeting and I hear a low-flying airplane, I run to the window. I don't care what they think about. So I joined Pratt & Whitney. And sometimes you can tell by the sound, what type of plane it is. But so it's another culture which I think John knows. You've been at Pratt & Whitney with those wild people, and Jesse knows. So there, I was working with a very select team, leading that team for rethinking their whole strategic manufacturing. Because as part of that work that Booz had been brought in for, there was a very major strategic assessment going on, starting from the marketplace, working backward. And Pratt's reputation was that these are engineering virtuosos. You want jet engines, you go to Pratt. But they were not known for being very smart about manufacturing. I mean, they made large watches, wristwatches, and the local taxi drivers would call it the watch factory. But GE, in that respect, arch competitor that had started to rise, was not as admired for their engineering, but they were very smart about manufacturing and designing the product for low cost or more competitive manufacturing. And then that story has threads that go into everything. That's what I was doing. And the team and the people I was working with were very instrumental in starting a process that I think turned the manufacturing around. I can't say I did it. I mean, I certainly was a part of it. At one time I was leading it, but they were very, very bright, hand-picked people. So here's the point I'm leading to. Go from Booz, all MBAs, hand-picked, very bright people, very intense culture, very focused, and you get a lot of positive reinforcement. Inside it can be brutal, but you go to Pratt, totally different type of organization, 40,000 people, different demographic of people, engineers, manufacturing, very proud culture. This is the Cold War period where everyone thought we are the bulwark of the defense of the US, and very inward looking. And coming straight from a very deeply intellect-focused heritage of Booz, I have to tell you, I was rather blind to that all. And I'm going to tell you a couple of stories that slowly opened my eyes, and I'm picking up on them because there are lessons to be learned. Okay, so I was still, considered very bright and really making an impact, getting a lot of positive feedback. And in the latter half of that career, I was reporting directly to the president of Pratt, who also led as Senior VP of Aerospace, the aerospace half of United Technologies. But story number one is, Jesse mentioned a program at MIT, right? So there's this, what used to be called the Leaders for Manufacturing program. I was representing UTC. And I was driving back one time with this wonderful, wonderful, very senior person, Dr. Bob Herman. He was the corporate senior VP for technology, so he was kind of the technology strategist for UTC's investment in long-term view. And we were chatting, I was driving, he was reading some things to me, and he says, Harsh, by the way, you're very bright. Felt good, man. He says, it's very obvious when you talk that you are very bright. I remember the words. Nor am I saying that you should talk differently. But look at Cassidy. He's also very bright. But it's not that obvious. Cassidy was a friend, is Dr. John Cassidy, who was director of the UT Research Labs, United Technology, hallowed organization. So it turned out this wonderful person, Bob Herman, was telling me in a very gentle way to be more modest, to be humble. He must have picked up that, I'm trying to show how bright I am, so people will say, Harsh, I need you to do this, etc. And he was alerting me. It's more than that. It's not enough to dazzle people. It's not enough to be bright. You have to be a whole person. And what does it mean to be a whole person? So you have to connect with people. It all comes down finally to head and heart. Character fits in there, values fit in there, and people. If you want to be a leader, it's about leading people. You don't lead machines. So that was a blind spot for a long time. It helped me discover that. Reminded me, I'm still thinking, it's been quite couple of decades, but you have to listen carefully and welcome people who are trying to help you what they say, because if it is well meant, you should also listen to what your enemies say, but maybe place more credence on credible people. Tongue in cheek, that was a joke. So the second story is, there was this time, probably before many of you were born, you would have heard of the Space Shuttle Challenger accident, right? Around 85, 86, somewhere there, 86, 87. And the problem started with the booster rockets. And the view that was developing in the government is the booster rocket industry is very backward. And they need to come into sophisticated areas. They said, Pratt & Whitney, look, they make such advanced products, and they know all about safety. They build engines that carry people and so on. So the government was trying to push Pratt & Whitney to take on rocket manufacturing. We already did liquid rockets, but this was solid rockets. Those big Roman candles that go off, and once you light them, you can't kind of switch them off. Liquid rockets you can. So they formed a committee, task force, I should say, to look at this and say, should Pratt get into this or not? And I've already kind of made the point quite emphatically that I worked hard to convey the image that I was bright. So they said, okay, Harsh, you represent us there. And the person who was leading the committee, a retired former head of engineering, he said, well, our discussions are going to remain confidential. And I said, okay, senior guy has spoken, thus he spake, so it shall be. And I started to not pick up on the fact that the president of manufacturing, who was formerly very high in engineering, didn't think it was a good idea. And I had a talk with him. He said, well, our business is making jet engines. Intellectually, I did not agree with it. But so here's the danger of feeling very bright. I ignored that. And that committee recommended Pratt should get into solid rocket manufacturing. And they launched an effort with, which was, it was in a huge warehouse, 200 people, 50, 60 engineers. Then they said, Harsh, the main thing is manufacturing. You lead the plan for how these rockets will be built. And we started sucking all the resources out. Now, eventually, for some reasons of terms and conditions, we pulled out. But the lesson I learned from that, I lost that man entirely. Very good man, Carl Thomas, who had been a big booster, but by ignoring and not thinking hard enough to say, I should have said I'm representing somebody. So in order to represent, I really need to understand very well what their objections are and although I may not agree, there is a way you can say, here's my personal view, and here are the issues that this person who has 40,000 people under him, head of engineering, does. I was blindsided. And that was a learning lesson, because after that, I realized that I had lost Carl Thomas and that entire team. If I was smarter, smarter is the wrong thing. If I were wiser, or if I had cultivated mentors or been more alive to the dynamics of how organizations run, I would have acted differently. It wouldn't have changed my views, but I think there would have been more accuracy in representing the pros and cons. And the third part of this is, so my boss was in the running for CEO of UTC. It was a 2-horse race. He didn't win it. He had done well. He elected to punch out. And I realized he was my only support system left. Right? So, lesson, there are several lessons out here. One is, it's not enough to be bright and dazzle people. You must be a whole person, because you don't become a leader by being bright. It helps if you're bright, but it's not even a key requirement. So you have to really become more sensitive to people, and not just the people above you, but also the people below you. And if you don't have the support of people below you, you cannot succeed. It's like a general in an army. Any organization you're at, they have to believe in you, trust in you, have the confidence that you are representing them well. Although you don't, you still may have to take unpleasant actions, but you can maintain trust and still take unpleasant actions. So you have to be sensitive to people and meet them where they are. So if you're dealing with people on the manufacturing floor, you need to be able to connect with them and understand, because we are all humans. They also have dreams. They have aspirations. They worry about things. And you have to have that personal connect and be empathetic. Second thing is, you have to learn to recognize that everybody has constituencies. Now, it's a much more powerful lesson for leaders who are at the top, because it's a balancing act. You can't just go by a single dimension. So you must very consciously know where, I think I'm running over, so I'll wind up very quickly, where your constituencies are. And pay attention to them. And pay attention to the people aspects. And in all of this, a little bit of humility never hurts. Modesty never hurts. Modesty doesn't mean you are weak. It doesn't mean that you lack confidence. It's allowing other people space. And rather than competing with them, helping them. Now, it's not always easy to do if you are in a race and it's a scarcity kind of thing. Either you get it or someone else gets it. But in the long run, I would say be an enabler, be a true leader. That will help you. It doesn't mean every step it will help you. So let me come to the final part of the story, and do I turn into a pumpkin at 6:20 sharp, or do we have a little flex?
6:30, so we have to be up by 6:20.
Okay. So now come back to, I've already been through Pratt, so when that person left, I also decided to take my own destiny in my hands, and joined Accenture Consulting. I was hired by a guy called Bill Green, very good guy. And I went for his charisma and just the dynamic. He was a young partner out there, worked 2 years. Now, with that blind spot, remember, I still was not that finely tuned to understanding cultures. At Pratt, the other learning is, the learning I got is understand cultures and respect people. Organizations are like tribes. They have the totems. So you really must understand what the culture of your tribe is. Who are their heroes? What are their values? How do they operate? And how do they judge people? It doesn't mean you sell out, but you still need to integrate and get the respect. Otherwise, organizations are also very good at organ rejection. You come in and eventually they tolerate you, and then you go. So Anderson Consulting worked my own. I worked at IBM, and then I left IBM because by the time I came back from being far away, my sponsors were gone, and PwC was just being brought in to take the consulting space. And the reality is, PwC is coming in, they'll take care of their people first. So I moved on, and around that time, India was attracting a lot of attention. And I was saying, I've done pretty well in my career, but wouldn't it be fun to be in the middle of that action there in India when all this stuff was happening? And then luck struck again, and there was this call with the same Bill Green I mentioned, who at this time was chairman CEO of Accenture, the same person who had hired me. And I was in India for suddenly within a month of that discussion as chairman of Accenture. And as Jesse mentioned, it was around 20,000 people at that time, and when I left, it was in excess of 75,000. And during that time, I also was elected chairman of NASSCOM, which is the industry body for this $90 billion industry where all the CEOs of the various companies are. So wonderful experience. What did I learn from that one? 2, 3 things. One, you didn't get there by yourself. You had people who helped you along. They either gave you good advice, or they supported you, or they were your mentors, or they were their role models. And that it's important to respect people. Now imagine if in this discussion with Bill Green, which was about 15 years I had left Anderson Consulting, and I had had no contact with him, but on the phone he remembered, we spoke, and he was telling me about all the discussions we had, with the points I used to make. If there had not been a good positive feeling, this would not have worked. The second thing I also discovered is it's very important for people are hungry for good role models. So when you go from 20,000 to 75,000 in just a few years, culture is a big issue. Values are a big issue. And with a very young workforce, median age there being about maybe 28, 29 years, how do you do that? So you have to lay the foundations for a culture, be a role model, and set the tone for the organization, because there is, in that part, not a long history to rely on, and not a lot of anecdotes to rely on. So that's another discussion. But I want to tell you that on this theme of people who help you, I contacted a professor who had been a really, really good guide and encourager in IIT. We connected. I contacted a teacher from school who was very fond of me and who I found very inspirational. And I say that there was he was the most influential person in my school years. But in the last year, I was rather disruptive in my class. And 10 years later in New York, I was thinking about it, and I said I wasn't fair. So I wrote him a letter explaining. Never heard back. But on a trip to India, I was in Calcutta visiting some people, and there was a young person. He said, "So you are Harsh Manglik?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Do you know Mr. Sharma? He read out your letter in class." Must have meant something, right? So I then met him. So I'm going to wrap up now. And I can't convey everything I've learned, but Hopefully it's been entertaining. So what do I say? And I actually jotted some of these things down, and I'll look at it. So first thing is, the future is unfolding. The world of the future will not be the world of the past. It's always been that way. So don't think that you are in a static world. Prepare yourself to be flexible, be resilient, be good learners, be your own chief development officer. Nobody else knows you as well as you do. And only you know your aspirations. So train yourself for the long haul. Your strengths and your skills will get you a job, but your blind spots can derail you. And if you have aspiration to be leaders, which you must have, then you have to see all these other areas of your development that you have to start on now and seek out ways to do that. So what does it take? Open mind, curiosity, appreciating ambiguity, take responsibility for your own careers, get a sense of who you are. You must know, you must have your own internal compass, and the higher you go, you will find yourself in ambiguous situations where you can't turn to somebody for an advice. You may be lonely. These will be gray zones, and the best thing that will give you stability, comfort, good sense is to be in touch with your convictions and your values. Character counts. Reputation takes a lifetime to build, but you can lose it in a moment. So always act with integrity. And focus on adding value and focus on outcomes. And enjoy what you are doing. It's one life. Find things that fulfill you, because when you are fulfilled, you are positive, you exude positive, positivism and to people around you. That's an obligation. And finally, develop other people around you as others have. I saw this quote in a doctor's office, and it was a picture of his father in India, and it said, if we see far, it is not because we are tall, it's because we stand on the shoulders of giants, or you could say of other people, right? So here's some advice, and I'll give it to you. I call it Panch Tattva 2.0. Panch Tattva is Sanskrit. It means 5 elements, 5 facts. But I mean it in a different sense. Therefore, it's 2.0, the 5 facts or 5 elements. And you have to go for the Harsh Manglik HM version, right? So it's 5 things that you need to have with you as you go through your career and your journey through life. I'll say it in Hindi, and then I'll translate it. First one is sapne, dreams. Dreams are very important. You must dream dreams because they give you reach, they give you imagination, and they give you aspiration. Without dreams, you won't get anywhere. Second is himmat, courage. Courage is important. Careers are not easy, decisions are not easy. You will go into difficulties, there'll be ups and downs. You will need it. So cultivate courage and feel good about it. Don't think that everything is arrived at in an analytical fashion through a formula. Leadership, careers, the whole person, they are matters of the heart as well as the mind. 3 is tapas. That means hard work, going through the fire, commitment, hard work, working on what you believe in. 4 is hamdardi, empathy, compassion. You must connect with people, even when you can't do anything. Open yourself up, show vulnerability. And last is iman, which translates to integrity, character. And I think if you always stick by these 5, you will go very far. And let me close on that note. I'm sorry I took too much time, but it's been a pleasure, and good luck to each and every one of you. Thank you.
Very much. I don't know
Pleasure.
how much Tepper paraphernalia you have, so it's time to start or continue your collection.
Thank you.
So, as you know, Harsh is going to be teaching a course next year. He's also going to be doing a seminar a week from Friday afternoon from 2:30 to 4:30 or so. So we're just putting out announcements about that. And that will be a little bit more kind of substantive about the approach to leadership and also give you a sense of the class for next year, for the first years. But of course, second years, please come as well. You'll be able to sign up for that. And that maybe that will be an opportunity to ask some questions. But we also have time now, but not in this room. Harsh is available for the next half hour, but we'll move it out to the lobby. We'll get comfortable out there, and you can spend some time with him before we leave for dinner. Okay, so thank you so much. It's been
Pleasure.
great, and thank you all for coming.
I have to tell you, I'm still,
Last word.
as the Chief Development Officer for myself, there's one thing I'm still working on, and it links to going too far. My daughters, those of you who have daughters or who are daughters would understand this, or sisters, they improve their parents always. And they give report cards. And the one consistent theme my daughters tell me in my improvement program is, Dad, you talk too much. Thank you.